Salesforce is a powerful and flexible CRM, but many companies struggle to get users to adopt the platform. In this podcast episode, Paul Ginsberg explains how to best tackle low user adoption of Salesforce at any organization. He offers helpful tips on how to make Salesforce more user-friendly and relevant to employees' needs, as well as strategies for increasing buy-in from management. With the right approach, businesses can see a significant increase in Salesforce adoption and maximize the benefits of this powerful tool. By listening to this podcast, you will learn how you can save time by implementing these simple steps that improve your sales team's overall productivity while also helping them to be more successful with their leads and customers. This episode is sponsored by Descript. Editing video and audio recordings can be a pain, especially if you're not very tech savvy. Even if you are comfortable editing video and audio, it can still be a time-consuming process. Descript is the solution to your video and audio editing woes. With this AI-powered tool, you can quickly and easily edit your recordings with little to no effort. Descript is by far my absolute favorite tool to edit any video or audio recording. This includes training videos, walkthrough videos for clients, Zoom meeting recordings, and more. If you know how to edit words in a Google Doc, you can edit your audio and video recordings in Descript. It's that easy. Descript will transcribe your recordings, create captions for you, publish them online, or let you cut and paste the transcript into any other document. You can take advantage of some powerful AI tools to enhance the audio, remove background noise, instantly remove all filler words like and you know, and even use a synthesized version of your own voice to convert any words you type into spoken text in your own voice. This is great for narrations, tweaking your recorded audio, and all sorts of other scenarios. I rely heavily on Descript to repurpose recordings of my Zoom meetings with clients, to turn the transcripts into business requirement documents, extract snippets of meetings to delegate tasks to team members, and more. Descript saves me and my team countless hours of work. Visit brainiate.info/Descript to start your own free trial today, and you'll see why I love Descript.
Welcome to the Brainiate Show, where we talk about all things Salesforce, sharing the coolest features, solutions, and best practices to turn you into a Salesforce rock star. Here's your host, former attorney turned Salesforce consultant and trainer, David Giller.
Have you ever wondered why your employees aren't using Salesforce? In this episode, Paul Ginsberg will explain how to best tackle low user adoption of Salesforce at any organization. If you're struggling with low user adoption of Salesforce in your company, listen up. You will learn about some of the common root causes of low user adoption and some tactics that you can leverage to overcome these challenges. By implementing these strategies into your business, you'll be able to get everyone on board using Salesforce as your true system of record. This will help your team run a more efficient business overall. This is an informative podcast episode every Salesforce professional should listen to. Paul Ginsberg is a Salesforce consultant based in Amsterdam. He is very involved in the Salesforce community, most notably as a leader for Your Leadin' and Nonprofit Dreamin', and he's a leader for the Salesforce Trailblazer Community Group in Amsterdam. His passions are bringing people together to share their knowledge and experiences, building communities of practice, and helping organizations adopt new ways of working with technology. Paul has been fortunate to work on some amazing Salesforce projects over the last 10 plus years. And in this podcast episode, he will drop some major words of wisdom on how to get the most out of Salesforce for your organization. Paul Ginsberg, welcome to the Brainy Show. How are you today?
I'm very humbled to be here. I'm very excited. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to share your wisdom and thoughts with my audience. I appreciate it.
And thanks everyone for listening. And even if you disagree with my thoughts, this is what I tell friends when I volunteer opinions. Even if you disagree with my thoughts, take it, process it. If it encourages you along a certain journey and causes reactions, that is you use it as a sounding board, and that is totally fine and totally valid. There's different approaches. What I say may not work for everyone. It's in the aspect of considering it that the real journey happens.
That's absolutely fair. And you know what? So far, I have not known you to say anything all that controversial. Me, on the other hand, I usually open my mouth and put my foot in it like quite often. And people are like, eyes bugged out. I cannot believe you just said that out loud. But yeah, I don't think you're going to tick anyone off. Don't worry about it. Anyway, Paul, for those who are listening and are not familiar with who you are and what you do in the Salesforce ecosystem, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I used to run the Amsterdam user group, and I've done that for 4 years. I no longer run the user group because I felt didn't need me as part of the leadership team. It was time for me to stand down and let others take that space. There was more that other people could contribute. So I'm really passionate about nonprofits and small and medium-sized businesses. I've been involved with the Salesforce ecosystem for 10 years, and I've been very active in the community for 5 or 6 years. My current projects that I'm involved with, just two, are Nonprofit Dreaming, which is a yearly event which is dear to my heart and proves that virtual events can work. And also I am part of the team which does Your Leading, which seeks to facilitate other user group leaders, other people that blog, and share a support network to help develop those ideas and give us all a platform where we can chat with each other.
Absolutely fantastic. And for those who are not familiar with Nonprofit Dreamin', when does it happen? When did it even start? And what can people learn from Nonprofit Dreamin'?
So Nonprofit Dreaming is squarely targeted at nonprofits using Salesforce. Could be your solo administrator. I say solo administrator, normally a smaller nonprofit.
Right.
They are doing 10 different things simultaneously, and Salesforce is just part of their role. So it's really seeking to understand the audience, not in the perfect world where Salesforce says you have three admins per 100 members of staff or anything like this. It's all about how it actually works. So what we also worked out was for the largest nonprofits, they are actually served by consultancies. They can buy in that expertise. So it's really about creating that peer support and providing them fantastic space to engage with each other, and some really good resources, which are all on our YouTube channel. So they can come back and refer to how it works with the challenges of nonprofits, which are slightly different from commercial organizations because you've got different types of funders, you've got volunteers with different needs and different buttons to press, quite frankly, from regular members of staff. So it only happens once a year. It's nonprofitdreaming.org, but there is a website, so you can view the YouTube channel, you can sign up to our mailing list to be kept up to date. And we're currently working out when it's going to be next year, because it was in January this year, but actually when it's we're probably going to team it. This might be breaking news. It's probably going to be a hybrid event. So we still reach out to the virtual audience. So those people that can't attend in person can still get a lot of benefit and different benefit from those people attending in person. But we're going to team it with a live event. So we're just currently working out which other event to team it with, and we're in discussions there. So it's going to be quite exciting. But also it makes a real call. Say, if you're going to have to travel for the event, you're going to get a lot out of it because we're going to be pairing with another exciting community-related event.
That's absolutely fantastic. And I can't imagine the logistics associated with having a hybrid event, because even for a regular in-person user group, for example, even just a small user group, trying to manage people in the room with questions and body language and discussions that might be happening, and trying to figure out how to be inclusive of those who are virtual, to see their facial expressions, to listen to their questions if they have any, to make sure that they can hear the questions that are taking place in the room. So those are all definitely big challenges. Clearly, there are many ways to address it, but there's some tough decisions.
And the honest answer, and this will come back to where we go later, there are some things which are known now, and some
Right.
things which we only know by trying. And sometimes it's the best way to find out. And also
Absolutely.
depends on the mood on the day. But with all of those, if you put in the prep work, you can game it and you can slightly trusting your instincts and understanding that you have the experience and that you've been involved, you can start to get the feeling and give it a try and see what works and what doesn't work. It's the only way that we
Absolutely.
progress the whole journey for all of us.
You know what? To your point, that's the only way that all of us have been able to get through this crazy COVID experience that we've been living through. Trial and error, improvise, evolve.
Yeah, and some great things have come out of it. The fact that some smaller communities where people live in regions where they don't have the critical mass for an in-person event, they can do an online event. And there are good tools out there, but maybe not the tool that everyone's using. The tool that
Right,
everyone's using is the vanilla ice cream. It
right.
doesn't necessarily set everyone's taste buds alike. The beige paint. Actually, I'm going to go with beige paint. It's a far better description. Does it? It's fine, but it doesn't set people's ideas and minds alight. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And again, things like podcasts. I'm now listening to podcasts since the start of COVID, and things I wouldn't have tried otherwise. I would have been too busy. So it means that you can take a step back. This is what I'm doing. Is this what I want to be doing? And I think everyone's doing that at the moment. I see a lot of people in the community considering their work plans and their personal plans and saying, am I happy with this balance? Is
I
this where
think
I want to
COVID
be?
has forced everyone to reevaluate every aspect of their lives, their career. For those who are in school, why am I pursuing this particular degree? Why am I in this school? Maybe there are other options that are more appropriate for people who are working. Why am I working at this job or in this career or with these people? As most of us have been stuck at home for some extended period of time, just reevaluating their environment. Why do I have all this clutter or these pieces of furniture? Just really everything, which is not so terrible because it allows people to do a little bit of self-reflection and
Yeah,
improve.
yeah. I'm not saying it's all perfect,
Right,
but
right.
I'd like to go
Oh,
back to in-person lives where we
oh,
don't
for
have to think,
sure.
oh, is that going to be popular? Is that going to be too popular? No, I don't want to go there at the moment. But there are definitely some huge bonuses to take forward.
Absolutely. Let's rewind back for a moment
Mm,
to the concept of nonprofits using Salesforce. This is a topic that I am personally pretty passionate about. So as a consultant, I work with companies that are both for-profit, financial services and healthcare and manufacturing, and schools, even for-profit schools and professional services, as well as nonprofits, both really small, as you indicated. People often typically assume that nonprofits, by definition, means really small nonprofits. And it's true, there are many very small nonprofits, but there are also many sizable, massive nonprofits that are using Salesforce. I believe Girl Scouts of America, Boy Scouts of America, American Red Cross, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. There's just so many very large nonprofits that are using Salesforce. And you mentioned earlier about that there are some nuances and business processes that are unique to the nonprofit world. Could you shed some light on what some of those nuances might be, or nuances as it relates to the processes that they are needing to track in Salesforce?
Okay, it actually turns out that overall, there isn't so much difference between a non-profit and a for-profit. Just want to make that very clear. A
Hmm.
non-profit is merely a tax status. It happens
Right.
that your government,
True.
whichever country you're in, has decided to give you some tax kickbacks because they reckon that they understand that what you're doing has a significant positive benefit for society.
Yep.
And so that they give you some kickback. So theoretically, it's all the same.
In
Where it
terms of
changes,
tracking people and organizations and
well,
interactions with them.
yeah, in terms of the core things that businesses all need to do. Every business wants a mailing list. Most businesses are trying to sell something. Every business needs to run some sort of survey. And most
Some
businesses
type
want
of
to collect
customer
money.
support, tracking
Yeah,
customer support, doing campaigns of some kind, trying to communicate with people, encouraging them to take some action.
yeah, exactly. It's all the same. Opportunities where, the language changes slightly. So what is the difference? It's actually speaking to someone who's relatively new to the nonprofit sector. It's the
Mhm.
meaning behind what you're doing. It's that you need to take everyone with you on this journey because you're
True.
you're not there just to sell widgets for the day. You're trying to build up long-term benefits. So it's about how you're doing it. You don't necessarily want to leave people behind. And that's both internal and external. So that's what we call stakeholders. So suddenly your business, and actually some of the bigger multinationals like the Nikes and the Adidases of the world are almost getting to that, where, or Apple even, where people feel that they have ownership of the product. And
Yeah.
that's where it's all different about how you manage that. So when you do something as a nonprofit, people feel that they are vested in you and that they should really be engaging with how your product's formulated, whether your product is a membership or whether it is a food bank.
Right.
People feel that they have ownership and they have involvement. And so there's that aspect. But then you've also got volunteers. The nature of the staff working at
Right.
the organization is different because for the smaller nonprofits, they're often volunteer heavy and your volunteers are different. With paid members of staff, you can have appraisals and you can say, you need to achieve this. And actually, the members of staff will have signed up because they have committed to do a job description.
Right.
So the moment they walk through the door, you are both managing expectations on the same page. With volunteers, it's different. They feel that they have some sort of ownership of the organization, which may or may not align with what the board of directors or the governors feel, but also they will have other things going on with their lives. And so they'll commit to things, but there will be a balance there. And also they may or may not have the skill sets that you're looking for because sometimes they have time availability, but not skill availability. And then you need to go through a process of training them up
Yeah.
and the interview process. But it's not as easy as saying, I'm going to take the best person available on the street. It's you're investing. And that's an absolutely really valid objective, but it's not the same as we need to produce this many widgets. You can't put it in a box. It's harder to get those numbers and to identify what you're trying to do. One of the things that charities have to do is capture a lot of metrics, and there's a lot of regulations, and they're very underfunded to get there. So that they've got a big pot, and they haven't got capacity to fill it all, and then they've got to do the dance of how to manage that day in, day out.
That's absolutely true. And to the point that you made before, you touched earlier on tracking of memberships. So with a membership, you can have different tiers of membership. You also have a membership start date and an expiration date. You have a dollar amount associated with the membership. And when tracking that, so in Salesforce, the membership is out of the box, by the way, for those who are not familiar with the Nonprofit Success Pack, a membership is tracked as an opportunity record type. Opportunities out of the box have multiple record types.
Really appallingly badly. So before we went live, David said, will I say anything controversial? I don't think that's controversial. I think it's recognized that out of the box, it sucks big time. Now, I do know that Salesforce runs some open community sprints,
Yes.
and they're trying to improve. And that's actually volunteers from the community, much like myself, because I do sit on this one, trying to improve how memberships are handled. But there's a lot of different ways to do memberships, and out of the box, Salesforce says that it does everything. Here I'm going off script. Salesforce says that it does everything. It can do everything.
Right.
And this goes back to the bucket. You've got the bucket, which can do
Mhm.
everything, but you've got to focus on what you want to achieve and make it tangible. So first tip, your aim might be sky high, break it into small steps so that you can at least say after 2 weeks, I have achieved something. And that's why I like
100%.
agile and sprint.
I also have no hesitation in calling out those areas of Salesforce that need a little bit of TLC. And there are many of them. Not looking to use Salesforce as a punching bag by any means. It's a magnificent
Yeah.
platform, but there are definitely areas where improvement is warranted,
And what you
sometimes
get
desperately.
what you get out of the box is incredible. And this is what how I always have a slight balance, a
Mhm.
challenge. I love how amazing the whole product stack is. Given its cost, it is amazing what you can get out of it. It's slightly challenging too. It's just like, why didn't they do this? This is all I need. Then you forget there's 100,000, a million people, tens of millions of people using the same product. And
Absolutely.
Salesforce also have to balance this out. So sometimes I get very frustrated and then I move on. Breathe in and go,
Yeah.
this is a battle I'm going to win or I'm not going to win. And then I move on.
Put it in the idea exchange, ask others to vote on it, and we move on to the next thing because there's always more to focus on.
Exactly. So focus on what you can do.
Yeah.
For sure, fight the long battles of things that you want to win. And this comes back to internal politics at organizations, because that's always a big thing.
100%.
Work out what's important to you, which are the big battles you want to fight, and which are the small wins that you can make do with. So that leaves you that pot of energy to challenge on the bigger things that you want to change or understand better.
And that is a fantastic segue to our main topic, which is user adoption. I think we've
Yep.
both seen in many organizations where they spend so much time and money and effort in terms of the licenses of the product and configuring Salesforce and migrating their data. And then they discover, lo and behold, user adoption is not where they hope or expect it should be. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I normally say, have you asked your end users? This happens in the corporate and the non-profit sector. I just see it often in the non-profit sector. The board want one thing and
Mhm.
the end users want something else. So the main theme here is communication. But when you're doing your adoption plan, when you're working out what your product is, I so often hear the management saying what they want, but they forget to check users what they want.
Not only
And
what they
they don't,
want, it's even what they need to
okay,
do their jobs. It's not, oh, I prefer it to be this shade of blue. No, in order for me to close deals for you, boss, here are the pieces of information that I need. But the boss has no idea because the boss hasn't done that in years.
yeah, I was working once as an IT support engineer and I needed my telephone to work. So I phoned up the telecoms department because it was a separate department and the normal person wasn't in. So the manager of the department tried to set up my telephone. I had to call him back 3 times to say it wasn't working. I was fired shortly thereafter. And basically, it's because the manager couldn't admit he didn't know how to do it.
Oh
The point
my
being, he's a
goodness.
manager. It is incredible, but he was a manager. He hadn't touched the actual telephone set up for years. I don't expect everyone to. I need to know how to do my job, not how to do other people's jobs. So if you don't know something, ask. And this is the best thing you can possibly do because often you get we do it this way, and then they'll say, but I'm not sure why. And then you can go and reinvent, then you can go and drill down and understand it. But basically, it's always asking people, and managers do a certain job. So you're not aware of the day-to-day challenges of what things have changed because business never remain the same at all. And so
It's
you just
absolutely true.
to keep your toes on the ground, but you don't need to do it yourself. You do that by communicating with other members of staff to find out what's happening.
100%. And I can't tell you how many times, even at the earlier stages of a project, before we actually do the rollout, as we're doing the business requirements gathering, and I'm meeting with a client, and I'm meeting with someone in senior leadership, and I'm asking details about what attributes does your team typically capture when talking to a new prospect, whether that prospect we're talking defining it as a company or as a person, and they start listing off a set of attributes. And then I start asking, what about some of these attributes that you haven't mentioned at all? Oh, no, we don't care about that. Are you sure? Like, that doesn't sound right. And very often they will say, you know what? Let's talk to someone on the team. That's a good case scenario. Let's talk to someone on the team who's actually doing it just to get their clarification. Yep. And
Yeah.
the worst case scenario is when they insist, oh, no, you're not talking to those people. They have no idea what they're doing. Listen to me.
So if they don't have any idea what they're doing, I'm really glad. This is the classic case. Those two are the classic case, and I'll come on to a second tip.
Mhm.
But if they don't have any idea what they're doing, how did they get into that position? And this is very tricky territory. I'm not going to say I'm the world's best at investigating this, but when they say that, you need to understand what's been broken in the organization to get to that stage, and then to unpick it, because otherwise you're only going to, by just listening to that one perspective, you're going to repeat the same error. And it's why I always get multiple perspectives in every project that I do. I get
Exactly.
multiple perspectives. So the other thing the good candidate, we're talking here about the power user. This is
Mhm.
so this could be the person that either hates the system the most or is the champion. And the person that hates the system the most is often the best because they have to live with
That's
it
right.
day in, day out. Now they may be jaded, but they will give you priceless information about why it doesn't work.
And they will not be shy about sharing the details of not only their
Exactly.
frustration, but here's what I need. Damn, if you could just include A, B, C, X, Y, Z, that would be magic. But I've been asking for it for 12 years and nobody's doing it. So you can start making your list. And as you're asking more follow-up questions, okay, you want to be able to track, let's say, the status. What are the status options that you might need? They will be happy to share it with you.
And they may be the person that complains the most because they're the person that cares the most.
That's right.
And that's what leads to that emotional action, that they see something that could be good, or they care about the users, they care about sending the widgets, or they just care about wasting so much time. That's why they'll be having that emotional response, because they're invested in it.
Absolutely. So to your point, reaching out to the biggest complainers is a great way to identify the reasons behind low user adoption and also identifying the ways in which you can dramatically improve the user adoption. And by the way, once you start addressing even some, not all, some of those things that those loudest complainers are complaining about, they're your biggest champions.
Yes and no. I agree. The only risk that you have to know yourself emotionally is once you start addressing the problems, if we're just talking about a change process, rather than a new implementation is a slightly different game. If we're
Right.
talking about a change process where we start to address some of the problems, sometimes you then open the flood doors because it causes everyone to look at the same screen with fresh eyes, with a bit more
That's right.
energy. So
Mhm.
when they complain 2 weeks after your new system has gone live, or that you've just put in some changes, it's a positive. It might not feel like it's a positive. It's 100% a positive. And all you
Step
say
in
is,
the right
great,
direction.
give me this information. I will put it on the backlog. I'll put it on my not Excel, Google Sheet. I will capture it as a case, however you're going to do it.
Right.
Then you've got your list and then you can prioritize, because you have to manage expectations. You can't do everything. But when the list of complaints come in, this is actually a good sign and not a sign to management that this is failing. This is a sign that people are waking up and starting to be able to use the system again and care about it for the first time in perhaps a long time.
I love it. Great advice. Let's talk about another reason why very often user adoption is low, which is that the CRM ends up not really being the record of truth for the organization. Tell us what you've seen as it relates to this typical scenario.
I try and avoid that scenario is the honest answer. It's like a monster that is attacking you from all sides. Sure, so we all know Salesforce should be the single source of truth. So you get records to feed in. And so what ideally you do is you take a small item, don't go for big bangs. If you look at the metrics, big bangs do not work. It's too much.
Mhm.
It's too much risk, because if you go off tangent, you spend a lot of money and you're in the wrong field, you're in the wrong country, you've just gone to the wrong place because maybe someone's made some assumptions which have changed even by doing it in agile. And I say agile, it's trendy, but what I mean is small, discrete chunks. You do one bit at a time. So you just keep onboarding new bits of
Incremental improvements.
functionality,
Yeah.
incremental improvements. That might be as much as one person's job role at a time or one set of spreadsheets at a time, if this is what we're talking about, and that is fine, or one new process at a time. But when someone says, we are launching a whole new amazing scheme, it's great. Can we do it in small chunks, please? Because you are actually making it better for them. And because they won't have worked it all out anyway. Because they did. One of my clients at the moment, they're electronics, they're a white goods manufacturer, and they've got no idea yet what the returns process will be like, but they're trying to create it. So we're not actually investing too much in the returns process because we're trying to work out what the level of returns will be, because otherwise we could spend a lot of businesses have margins. We could be spending a lot of money on maybe it's actually 5% return rate is different from a 50% return rate. There's different strategies. We're not going to get to 50%, but just saying that there's different strategies. If something only happens once in 1,000 times, actually someone sending a human email, typing it out manually might be the best process versus something that versus the top 10 causes, which we know what the top 10 causes are. So those we can work out, and you pull out the methods, pull out the YouTubes, whatever's necessary.
I agree with you. And to your point, go ahead, you were going to say something else.
So that's the first, do things incrementally. The second challenge that you have is you have creep. You have the incremental, but you have other people doing incremental things as well. So another organization I'm working with, they've got a training system, and that seems to be all linked to their WordPress. So they're training lots of people. I don't know how this happened. They didn't touch base with me. They thought this was a good idea. It was all working. But now they've got all their training data of everyone who's being trained on one system and Salesforce out there, and then they can't message people about the training, and they have to do these really clunky systems, they're telling me.
Yeah.
So it is about installing a culture of communication so that when people are trying new things, they discuss it with you. But also you have to bear in mind, if you make the challenges too much, like I am busy, I can't do this for X period of time, they're just going to do it their own way. You have to recognize this is the reality.
Absolutely true.
It's not good news, but it's just where we are today. It's how empowered people are. And actually, it's a really good thing. It keeps us all on our toes. So we don't become like the traditional old school IT, which used to control everything and stomp on any innovation. So it's a challenge for us. Haven't got all the answers, but we need to be aware that it's happening. And so you need to be aware with the business and at least put in passive support and say, okay, great, you're putting in a new training system. Can you check that they've got integration with Salesforce? So at least when you've got capacity to do it, you can say, look, there's 5 different training platforms. That doesn't have any integration with Salesforce. Why don't you really take a look at these other platforms and see if they can make it with you? And then we can hopefully put it into the schedule to get it all to link later. Because the cost of undoing that mess is going to be huge.
Right. I want to go back for a moment to one of the scenarios that you called out earlier, because I think there's a little bit more to unpack there. We talked about where very often we uncover that there are other, I'll use the word mystery spreadsheets. It's like having a casual conversation with someone about anything, any of their business processes, and all of a sudden they mention some other mystery spreadsheet that you've never heard about before, and you find out that they have a separate list of whether it's prospects or customers or deals or activities that are being tracked separately outside of Salesforce. And the point that you made earlier, which is doing it incrementally and even addressing it just one spreadsheet at a time, I just want to unpack that for a moment, because even that by itself can seem like, to your point, it's never going to end. There's always going to be some other spreadsheet somewhere. Yeah. One of the ways that I have found to nip it in the bud while trying to incorporate everything represented in that spreadsheet in Salesforce, to nip it in the bud and try to prevent additional new spreadsheets from getting created, is by having more of that strategic conversation with the person who either created the spreadsheet or is ultimately responsible for the spreadsheet, and starting to ask questions about, what is it that you're tracking here? Why is it that it's tracked separately and not in Salesforce? And very often, by the way, they have very legitimate reasons all sorts of very legitimate reasons. It could be the user interface. It could be the fields that they need aren't available. It could be that there are other APIs or duplicate rules that are bonkers and totally destroying their data or manipulating their data as soon as they hit save. And it ends up eroding the trust that they have in the system. But if you're able to take, as the admin, if you're able to take that spreadsheet and to identify the root causes of why is it that they don't feel comfortable putting this in Salesforce and start to address those. And in the process, even if that spreadsheet is only 100 rows of data, it's not that big of a deal. And you're able to start chipping away at some of the reasons why people are not using Salesforce. Not only will you eliminate that spreadsheet, but you will also reposition your own role and reposition Salesforce where the next time someone starts to create a new spreadsheet, even if it's just by habit, and they're creating a spreadsheet thinking, oh, it's easier to just do it here than to enter it in Salesforce, they're going to rethink that and realize, oh, wait a minute, maybe we should have that conversation initially.
So what you're talking about is culture. You're
Yes.
changing the culture of the organization. So I once worked at a think tank, and it had a purpose-built building, 1750. That was the date that the purpose-built building was done.
Oh
It
my God.
wasn't entirely suited to modern times.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that the chief exec did when he took over the role was literally demolish the walls between each office. It was a grade 2 listed building. He had to apply for a lot of permissions. It took some time, but it protected the building. But he still did it. But it enabled people to talk to each other. And this brings us back to Salesforce. It's not the right name. If Salesforce was to come out today, it would be called something else because it's all about business process management. And that's where you've got to instill people to think as a company and think together, not just think of their own bonuses, what's in it for them, but if the entire team benefits, their job will be easier. So it's all about what's in it for them. Even if they do have to use a spreadsheet, they might then think, do I have to capture everything or can I have a link
That's right.
to the records on Salesforce? So it's partially there. The other thing that I say is sometimes the last thing you want to do is put a new process on Salesforce. Just thought of this process. It's not mature yet. So actually, why don't you work with it for 3 weeks live? Then I'll put it on Salesforce for you.
Excellent point. If it's a half-baked process, too premature to start putting it into Salesforce.
Half-baked sounds very cool, but if you think about a pie, it literally is half-baked. It's like being in the oven for 10 minutes. It needs another 20 minutes to make it feel good. Yeah, this is nice, but I think we can do better.
All right, let's talk about another reason for low user adoption, closely related to the CRM not being the record of truth: poor data quality.
Yeah, that's a challenge. Easy answers, there aren't many. You have to be aware of the issue and ask what you're trying to achieve. Where people say they need every record to be perfect, does the cost outweigh the benefit? Be realistic about these things. So if you have some people signed up and you know that they're not meant to be signed up to your mailing list, if it's 10%, does it impact what you're trying to achieve? So yes, there are validation rules. Yes, there are tools online. Yes, you can add help tips. There's all sorts of things you can do. And yes, you need to educate people. You also have to tell everyone that they all own the data. There is not someone who looks after all. I'm the Salesforce admin. I look after all the 100,000 records. Hell no. So you divide and conquer. You make people feel that they own the data, and then they'll care about it. It's a bit like parks versus your own home. Your own home is clean. Parks look a bit messier because people aren't always tidying up after when they have a picnic. They try their best to tidy up, but maybe they miss a can of Pims or something.
Yeah.
It's just what happens. People need to feel ownership, and then hopefully it's cleaner. They should feel like it's their own home. Or if they're not the tidiest individuals, feel like they're going round to a friend's home, somewhere that they're going to care about, basically. You have to position the case in ways that they understand. Do not use your own language. Give them comparisons. So I always talk about chocolate bars or something. Salesforce was once I heard someone compare it to a car, and that did not resonate to me. Salesforce is a house with lots of different rooms with different things going on. You can add an extension to the house. You can add a pool to the house. You can add a sports gym to the house. But so saying it was a car didn't work for me. So you always have to use analogies that will work for people. You have to put yourself in their space. So it's not about how it's going to make your life easier, it's how it's going to make their life easier.
I agree. And to your point on holding people accountable for their own data, and the term their own can be used literally, as in the records that they are responsible for, but it could also be used a little bit more loosely, as in the records that they care most about. I've often
Yeah.
found that there's some low-hanging fruit where you can simply use list views and reports in order to pull data for specific users. Let's say, for example, my contacts that don't have a job title populated, my tier 1 accounts that don't have any contacts, my tier 1 accounts that don't have a mailing address. You can just go on and on with so many different
But
variations.
it comes back to management want big shiny projects. I'm all about the little person. You need to work out what their wall of shame, what their wall of exceptions could be. How does it relate to their business? So the examples that you were just listing, like accounts without any contacts, that's a cross-filter report. I absolutely love them. Look them up. There's a blog out there by me. Anyway, the point here is that what you do is you do a list of the top 10 data quality errors that you see, and then you craft your report so that it shows you these errors, opportunities that haven't been followed up in a certain period of time, something with more than 100 tasks, things with fields not populated. You can create reports for all of these, because if you're not using reports, then why are you bothering with Salesforce? You're missing the trick here. You're putting in all the effort and not getting out any of the reward. So what I do is I have a report, or I set up reports if the person can't do it, or dashboards, or you train them to how to do it. You set up the dashboards with all the reports, which should be showing 0. So it's really easy for them to look at. They don't have to look for the exceptions. They should be looking at a blank screen. And then when it's populated, it means there's a problem. And then what I do is, for those users, I recommend that they log in once a week or once a month to look at these reports. Maybe some of them they look in once a week, and perhaps the logons they only look at once a month. If it's an administrator, you don't want to check it every day, you drive yourself mad. But you look at it once a month. Oh, look, someone hasn't logged in the last month. I need to go and talk to them. But it should be shown blank. So it's really easy to mentally process that when you put that time aside in your diary as a repeat recurring appointment, not just something you're going to do occasionally when you remember to do it, because that ain't going to happen. You can then go and see what's going on and then engage. But it has to be, so it's going back, management like big shiny projects. You can have a big shiny house, but if you don't put the basin in the bathroom, it's still going to be useless. You have to kit it out. So you have to think about what the users are doing, and you spend a lot. You put up a building, it takes a year to put it up. You then have to spend 6 months kitting out all the rooms, waiting for the concrete to dry, whatever it is. Check it. Like when you move into a house, it's not even about kitting out. When you move into a home, you don't get it all right on day one. It takes 6 months. You have to go, actually, this piece of furniture blocks me every time I come into the living room and I want to get to this cupboard. It's in the wrong place, and it's probably the wrong size of furniture as well. So it takes time, but you need to think of those details. This is what pisses me off, is people don't have concern for the details because it doesn't sound sexy. When they're selling it at their board meetings, it does not sound sexy. It's the stuff that makes us want to use it. Like, you can't see this on the podcast, but David has got a purple background. And it actually makes him look a bit younger to look at than the last time I spoke to him. And it's really cool. And it's just LED lighting or something. And it cost a few pennies. The thought, the effort to put it in there, to choose the one, that took time. You can't monetize it, but it's hugely valuable. I'm not saying that I don't like talking to old people, but it changes the engagement that I have with him. Anyway.
Thank you. So to your point, the list views and the reports can be very helpful, but if we don't tie them into the big shiny projects or key milestones or our successes that senior management values as being important, it's going to seem meaningless. So in order to put it into context, by the way, very often I will introduce this concept to my client organizations when they want to do a mass email distribution. And they go ahead and they pull a list of all of their customers and prospects that have an email address, and that's when they discover that 80% of the contacts and prospects do not have an email address in Salesforce, and they're like, oh my gosh, what the
Gosh.
heck is going on? This is really easy. All we really have to do is pull a report of all contacts or leads or both that do not have an email address, group them by the record owner, and start distributing it to the team and tell them, listen, on Tuesday, we're going to be doing a mass email distribution. And all of these people do not have an email address populated in Salesforce. Therefore, they will not be included in the email distribution. So we're also not only making it tangible and tying it to a big win for the organization of getting that email out, but we're also giving them a deadline. Hey, you missed the boat by Tuesday. That email still went out, but it did not go to all of your people that are included in this report. So those are some ways to tie in the otherwise ugly, non-sexy metrics in a way that is meaningful to the end users.
Yeah, and you have to take management with you, and I'm learning from David's tips here. I wanted to say the
Okay.
old thing I have just realized was not about old. It's the first word that came to my mind, and that's not always the right thing, which is why reflection is good. It's about previously he looked grayed out and lack of tone, and now he's vibrant and full of color. So just wanted to point that out.
I look more alive. Thank you. I appreciate
Yes, basically.
I've been called worse things in my life. It's fine. It's all good. Let's talk a little bit about lack of end user training, another major root cause of poor user adoption. What are your thoughts on this one?
This is the bit on the chart where people say, we've run out of money. We'll manage it ourselves.
Yeah.
No, people skimp, and then your expensive project has just fallen flat on the ground. We are human. People have a day job as well as needing to be trained on the new thing. So you need to allow time for this. And I've certainly spoken to some professional trainers who reckon that actually you need to bring on the training right throughout the whole project management life cycle. As soon as you start the project management, you should be doing a separate but locked in thing of how to do the training, because cultural change takes time. If you want people to be using it, they have to turn up for the training. They have to be in the right mind for doing the training. Otherwise, it could be like turning up on a Monday morning without any coffee, or worse, on a Friday afternoon when you want to be at the pub, or you want to get home to your family, or you want to go to the cinema, and you're meant to be at work. It just ain't gonna happen. So training is just hugely important. But it's not just the initial training. It's ongoing training, because initial training presumes that there'll never be any staff turnover. Got news for you. That's nice. Not going to happen. But it's a very nice concept. So I congratulate you for your optimism.
Mhm.
So the thing I would say is about training is make sure you write the training guides at the same time as you're putting out each new feature. Break it up into small manageable chunks. If you don't put it out when you write the new feature, you will forget, or whoever it is will forget the nuances about why you're doing this. And then you can't ever challenge those nuances. So I always cheat. I do my training guides. Yes, you need them in multiple mediums these days. Most people learn visually. People learn in different fashions. You have to accept this. And most people learn by doing. So no matter how good your materials, use the sandbox, run the test environment.
To the point that you made before, Paul, for those who are not familiar with it, I have seen this more times than I can count, where organizations put together a budget for the Salesforce project, whether it's a brand new implementation or enhancing an existing implementation. They'll put together the budget for the licensing, for the configuration development work, for the data migration. And then when it comes to end user training, it's a complete afterthought. And budget? No, there is no more budget for that. It was never considered from day one, so there was never a line item in the budget for it, or the line item includes the equivalent of 1 hour training for end users, and that is a recipe for disaster. That is basically guaranteeing that all of the money spent on the entire project is for nothing, because you can have the coolest, nicest, let's say the version of a Tesla, someone who has never been in a Tesla before, and you have the newest Tesla, but you're not going to give instructions to anyone on how to operate this thing, how to charge it, how to drive it, how to do anything with it. It's just as bad if you're only spending an hour. It takes more time than
And
that to learn.
And I'm sure that people are glazing over even now when we say about training. But this is, you're listening to the podcast to gain the benefit of our experience. This is why we're
Absolutely.
calling it out. It is about the training. It's not always about this, even for us as consultants or whoever you happen to be listening in. It's not just about doing the points and clicks. If you want people to be using your product and enthusing about all that hard work that
Mhm.
you put in, they also need to do the training on it. And also, yeah.
Exactly.
And as I say, Matt, not just the training, always put yourself as, if I am a new joiner in 6 months' time, how do I come into this organization? Because that's actually, there's a transition training that you need for the existing group, but there's almost a separate batch of training which says, let's cut out all the old baggage because they don't need to know what this was called on the old system.
That's right.
They just need to know how to get on with it now.
That's right. And to the point that you made earlier about ongoing training, so aside from the fact that even internally within an organization, forget turnover as in people leaving the organization, other people coming in, even within an organization, someone goes from being in sales to customer support. Someone goes from being a sales manager to a sales leader, from a call center employee to a call center manager. The features that they have available to them in Salesforce are different.
Yep.
Their responsibilities are different. The things that they care about are different.
And also, after 6 months of using the system, they will have different thought processes.
Right.
And so this is where I often end up in is support, but it's support and training because it's like, it's really 9 times out of 10 a training issue. It's not about how to get a new
Mhm.
feature because they'll want to do more with it. And this feature already exists. You just need to click this button to make it happen. And
By the way,
that's the
those
joy. This is where Salesforce comes into itself because those
yes,
small tweaks which really save hours, days, months, years, or just make you happier with the day that you can actually track on what's going on, that's where the joy comes in. And a lot of it's down to reporting. Can't emphasize how much it is down to reporting.
exactly. And to the point that you made earlier about as consultants, it's not about the point and click, it's about introducing improvements, efficiency to the organization and solving problems for the organization. So often, because end user training, we're talking basics, fundamentals of how to use the basics of Salesforce. The end user training is not there. So often, I find myself in a conversation with a client, and sometimes it's even a prospect, and they turn to me and they're like, yeah, so we need some custom way of being able to track when we have a phone call, when someone is calling a customer or prospect, and we need somewhere to put the notes. And right now we're putting it all in, let's say, the description field. And we need
Yeah.
somewhere to put, we need to call them back next week because they said we should follow up next week. And I show them, here's how you can watch this. You go ahead, share your screen. I'll show you where to click, and you go ahead and do it. It's out of the box.
I've seen Salesforce gain red accounts because people don't know how to use their own system that they've got, or because the consultant's done it in the stall and run. And that's not the point of me being a consultant. The point of me
Right.
being a consultant is to get happy users. Now, I don't want to have to do their job for them every day. So I want to
Right.
train them so that I can move on to the more interesting challenges because
Which is
I will get
empowering them and teaching them how to
absolutely,
fish.
absolutely. I agree with you 1,000%.
By the way, just to get a little bit more granular on that one for a minute, even though it's a little bit of a diversion, but all too often, people who are not used to the Salesforce platform will assume that it needs to be an admin or it needs to be an external consultant to create a report for them in Salesforce. And this blows my mind. And I often will turn to the person requesting it and say, okay, let me get this straight for you. In the world of Salesforce, because individual security, the permissions of what they are allowed to see, holds true not only when they're looking at a record, but also when they're pulling a report, you should be empowered. All end users should be empowered to create whatever reports, whatever dashboards, whatever list views they need for themselves.
Can I give you an example?
Go
I
ahead.
was working as an IT support help desk professional before I discovered Salesforce.
Hmm.
And I wanted to know how many calls I was closing and what the status of my open calls was. I had to ask my friend, who was on the other side of the office, to do a report. And it would take about a month if I went through the normal channels for him to create that report. I stopped asking because it was just too tedious. I didn't gain the insights. I couldn't spot the recurring patterns because I'd just been browbeaten. My friend came in, started doing that job, took him out for lunch, got all my reports done. A lot happier. I could make my insights. I could see how much work I was doing each day. So I knew when I was having a good day and a bad day. And it just made me happier in my job. And I could say, look, actually, we've got these other 10 virus things coming in. Boss, we've got a problem here. Just before all the computers crashed because there was a bad update, we could see what was happening in real time because we
And that's
had
a
meaningful
perfect
reports.
example of allowing the end user to do their job in a way that's more efficient than senior management wants it to be.
Senior management want control, and you've chosen the members of staff. If you've chosen the right members of staff, give them the freedom. With reports, as you point out, and I mentioned it's my favorite feature on Salesforce, you empower people. They can't damage the system. They can misunderstand the results
Right.
that I'll give you. You can't break things. I'd say with reports is they fall fairly and squarely under things that most people should learn how to do. If you need to if you need to do something every day, learn how to do it. If you need to do something once a month, write down good notes so you can go back to it once a month and see what you need to do. If you need to do something once every 3 months or less often than that, then perhaps ask someone else to do it. Perhaps you don't build up that bank
Right.
of experience. So that's how I run my gig, basically. If I'm having to do Apex, theoretically I can hack it. I'd
Mhm.
probably muck it up. I'm not going to do that. I'll get someone who actually enjoys doing that to do it in 5 minutes rather than me to take 2 days and still not have done the help class to go with it.
I couldn't agree more. By the way, anytime someone will turn to me and ask a question or ask for help using the word Apex, I'm like, hold up my hands like you lost me at Apex. I'm happy to delegate it to someone else or introduce you to someone else that can help solve that issue. I do have people on my team who can help with it, but it's not going to be me. That is beyond my skill set.
It's just I wouldn't use the word beyond. I'd say it's a different skill set because you're great at other things. We can't all be great at everything.
Right. Yeah, it's beyond my current skill set. And it's
No,
not
no,
something that I'm
no, you're not.
interested in
It's just
learning
a
at this time.
different skill set. It's something you've chosen not to focus on. Own the fact that you don't do it
Right.
and let someone else. There's other things for people to love, and I'm glad that it works like that.
Exactly. So we talked about lack of support from a technology perspective. We talked to some extent lack of support from a leadership perspective in terms of middle management. But I think you and I have both seen situations where user adoption is low because of lack of support at the grand level where senior leadership just doesn't care. Can you talk about that a little?
There's two ways. Salesforce are very categorical. If senior leadership don't care, in the long run, it's not going to work. That's how they look at it. And I think we have to be honest about that. That said, sometimes there's a groundswell of support that wants something to succeed, and the senior leadership will just let people get on with it. But actually, what I want to talk about is how we remain engaged on the ground level, because I think that's the exciting thing. I'm all about self-empowerment. You mentioned empowerment earlier. I'm really on
Yeah.
about self-empowerment because Salesforce is a great tool. And if we can show that we're doing fantastic things, and if staff can show that they're happy, because sometimes change comes top down and sometimes it comes bottom up. You need both in the world. There's no one way to do anything. So my thing that I like to do was do lunchtime walks and lunchtime sessions. So I'd have a range of snacks and I'd sit in a room. And at one particular organization, no one would ever show, but I'd advertise in the weekly newsletter. Actually, this is incorrect. There was one lady from the membership department who used to come and sit with me because I think she felt sorry for me. But we just used to have a chat and that was fine. But I also then did floor walks. And so I'd walk around the building because, hey, those were the days. And I would say, does anyone have a problem? And people after a while would say, I'm quite busy now, but can I book in some time with you? Because they knew that my door was open. The fact that it's marketing the misdirection. They don't have to come to the sessions that I advertise. I just want to engage with them in whatever method is necessary because it's my job to make people use the system. So even though they weren't using it, if I hadn't done the floor walks, if I hadn't done the lunch, they'd say, oh, I'm sorry I can't come to the lunch. Could I book in a session with you. And that's how we'll do it. And sometimes I'll come to the lunch actually, when's your next one? And they'll be amazed that they'll be there by themselves and then would do whatever they needed to do. And that was fantastic. So I cheat the system when it comes to, but also what you do is you have your groups of power users. You identify the people who are championing your system or who are engaged, even if it doesn't appear to be part of their role at all. Doesn't matter. Take the people that are engaged because they are your ears on the ground, depending on the size of the organization. They are the ears on the ground. And then also have the meetings for the department heads. And if the department heads appear disengaged, I think we can politely put it sometimes, say, why don't you just say, I know that you're very busy today. Why don't you send such and such instead? And actually, you then have the right people turning up to the meetings. So you invite them. Again, it's a bit of misdirection. They're not engaged. Eventually, they'll back out because they've got better things to do. You get the right people there who will then take it forward. And that is absolutely fine. Because,
by the way, a lot of times they will thank you silently. They will thank you for it because they never really wanted to be involved. They never really wanted to be responsible because there is that lack of engagement. So they are more than happy to delegate it over to someone else.
yeah. And actually, sometimes, you know what? You can try all you want and it doesn't work.
Right.
But hopefully that's with a particular team. And then you just focus on the other teams where it is working. And eventually, actually, I've seen them circle back and go, actually, we need to do this. Or you could, or otherwise you're a bit mean and say, I'd like to do that for you, but first of all, you need to do this. So some carrots, some sticks. Sometimes you go, this is a battle that's not worth fighting at the moment. I have 10 other priorities. You have to get the balance and for sure communicate with your leadership how you're playing that game. And then they can say, actually, no, we need to achieve this. And they just go, okay, I'll try the method that you've said. So you make sure that you maintain the full support of your leadership and let them take that for you. And that's fine. As long as you're achieving the objectives of your role, that's the important thing.
We actually covered many of the core reasons why user adoption is often low for organizations that are utilizing not only Salesforce, but really any technology platform. But let's circle back so that for those of you who are listening, if any of these issues resonate with you, you have some clear understanding of what you can do in order to tackle some of these low user adoption issues. So the first one is demonstrating the value of the system, demonstrating the value of having a centralized database, demonstrating the value of here's how this technology is going to help you do your job easier. Paul, any thoughts on that before I move on to the next one?
I've got one thought for the very end. But
okay.
I'm saving the best till last-ish. I'm saving the other point last.
Phenomenal. The second one is trying to break the cycle of either lack of data or erroneous data or duplicate data, breaking the cycle by cleaning up the data or by addressing the dirty data. So let's try to put an end to the floodgates of bad data in the system. Providing end user support, which means not only training and guidance and best practices and also support by senior leadership to have senior leadership demonstrate that they actually care, that their end users are working in a way that's more productive and more efficient and having that centralized database and responding to user feedback. So not only collecting the user feedback, those biggest complainers, if you're the Salesforce admin, those people should be your best friends. Those are the people who are going to give you the abbreviated list of what you can do to be a rock star within your organization as an admin. So engaging with your end users, responding to end user feedback, and just keep doing those things, and user adoption is going to improve dramatically. Paul, what are your thoughts?
Of course, I agree with all of the above and very nicely summarized as well. I've got one extra thing to throw at you. Throughout all of this, your body will be sending you messages, your instinct. Listen to your instinct. It's the subconscious having listened to this podcast and to all the work that you've done as a Salesforce professional. If you're uncomfortable, if you think something's not adding up here, you're probably right. It's your subconscious trying to tell you something. So don't knock out your instinct. That's your years of experience, both in the Salesforce field, but also in other fields where you come across different life experiences. So tune into it, let it speak to you, let it breathe, understand it, and then act on it or don't act on it, but understand where it's coming from. That's the value which we bring to the role. As well as ticking all the boxes, it's the human element. Just as we've been discussing the fact that management and the end users are human, you're also human. So bring all the joy that brings to the role, and you'll come out smiling. It will make you happier, and you'll have more successful implementations and the rest of it.
Paul, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your wisdom, your advice. Thank you for joining me on this podcast episode. I have no doubt that my audience is going to find a lot of beneficial tips from the insights that you've shared. Keep trailblazing, Paul, and continue being the rock star that you are.
Thank you for taking the time to listen through to the end of this episode of The Brainy Show. We value you and hope that this episode will help you in your career. If you like this episode, please share it with your fellow trailblazers in the Salesforce community. What's the expression? They say sharing is caring. Visit brainy8.show to check out the show notes for this episode, where you'll discover more about any of the themes or resources discussed in it. Finally, don't forget to rate and review this episode on your favorite podcast app so that others can find it more easily. Until next time, bye-bye.